Sally. Hi guys, good morning. How are you enjoying Dent thus far? It's good, high energy this morning. Yes, I'll keep it going. More NASA content. This morning I'm going to talk a little bit about not just the innovative ideas, the new solvers that are kind of entering the ecosystem that the government and others have been working with, but also how seekers to those problems have been thinking differently about how to structure engagements and the types of tools that they have available to them in order to try to stimulate innovation. And this all, you guys have seen this quote 1,000 times before, this all comes down to the premise that we cannot possibly at any of our organizations employ all of the smartest people on all of the possible subjects that we would ever want to explore at the same time. So how is it that you tap into, on demand, the expertise, the perspectives, the innovation that you need when you need it? There have been actually quite a bit of a renaissance of some methods in the last decade or so, specifically within the government, but also elsewhere in industry, around using things like prize competitions, crowdsourcing in citizen science, engaging the maker community, and leveraging user-centered design and design thinking type of approaches in order to introduce clear empathy and ethnography into the way that we design solutions for people. These are all kind of methods for encouraging innovation. The who you might work with through the maker community or the citizen science communities, the how you might pose the problem by stating something as a prize where you only specify the problem and the goal that you're trying to achieve, and there's a number of different paths that someone could take to get there. You're not hyper-prescribing or assuming that you know the best route to get to that performance of that solution. You only pay for the result. So these are all methods, right? So they're kind of hard to talk about in a way that resonates with a lot because they seem like just new ways of doing business, which they are. These are new ways of thinking about structuring problem solving and new communities to engage in solving those problems. And an important point here, I call these the 4 Gs, gold, guts, good, and glory. There are a number of different reasons why people will want to work with you if they're not your employee and you're paying them. Well, and that's partially gold, right? With prize competitions, you offer up some money. People might participate because they want that money. Business plan competitions, accelerator competitions. They might come not just for the gold, but also for the glory, to have won, right? To get the stage and the recognition of being the one that actually won that competition. But there's also competitions or activities people participate in just for the good of it because they believe in the problem. They believe in what it is that is trying to be solved and they want to contribute some of their time and their energy towards that. Or guts. So one of the first prize competitions here in the US was actually the Orteig Prize. Who's heard of the Orteig Prize? Okay, now who's heard of Charles Lindbergh? So Charles Lindbergh won the Orteig Prize. It was a prize to fly across the Atlantic for $25,000. That's why he did that, to win the Orteig Prize, right? But the gold, $25,000, lots of people died trying to do that. So that was only part of the reason why Charles Lindbergh attempted to win that prize competition. I can tell you the big reason was the guts part, right? Wanted to be the first person to demonstrate that he could do that. So an important point is that when you're designing these types of activities to engage new people in problem solving, you have to be thinking about not just what you want to solve, but how you're going to incentivize those people that you want to solve to come forward and participate. Sometimes you end up designing different tools based on the types of people that you want to engage. So incentives have to be something that you think about very, very clearly up front. So I'm going to spend the rest of the talk giving you guys some really cool examples of specific, compelling problems that a seeker, an organization, decided to structure an innovative way to try to address and identify new ideas in order to solve that problem from non-traditional solvers. So first example here, does everybody remember the Ebola crisis in 2014? Just how much anxiety, not only in other parts of the world, but here in the US, when the couple cases showed up here in the US about this huge infectious disease that was just spreading through West Africa, killing hundreds of people and then thousands of people. And we've got healthcare workers on the front line. They're treating these folks in, this is a white personal protective equipment suit, but you probably saw most of the pictures around in the papers of the big yellow ones that are the ones that the Doctors Without Borders actually distribute to in some of these emergency response situations. Those suits haven't been innovated on in over 20 years. In fact, a lot of these things that were deployed to West Africa during the emergency were taken off of these strategic stockpile shelves that were dated from the 80s, right? So these have been around. These haven't been innovated on in these suits in decades. Why is this a problem? Well, because it takes you about 45 minutes to put one on. I put one on and experienced that firsthand. It's not easy to put it on the right way. It's plastic. So you're in the middle of the heat in the West African humidity in a plastic suit. You can only work without facing dehydration for about 40 minutes as a healthcare worker. That's doctors, that's nurses, that's anybody that puts one of these things on. But you can't go interact with a patient without having one of these things on, because any contact with fluid and you're at risk of contracting the disease. Then it takes you even longer to take it off than the 40 minutes. Imagine you're dehydrated, you're tired, now you're facing another hour to take this stuff off in a way where you're not going to touch any of the potential fluids that are all over you that you just had treating these folks. So you might get in 3 times a day, 40-minute times a day that you can actually go and treat patients. And meanwhile, each of these things are disposable. They're being thrown away each time that someone is putting on a new one and taking one off. We got to be able to do better. I mean, when you go surfing with wetsuits, you got one zip in the back, you got the whole thing off in a second. How is that not a type of method or a type of design that we could be thinking about for these kinds of suits to make it easier for people to take these things off? So what the USAID, the United States Agency for International Development, the CDC, the Department of Defense, and the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy worked on in September of 2014 was launching a grand challenge to fight Ebola. And that grand challenge to fight Ebola used 3 distinct innovation tools in order to try to source new ideas around trying to innovate on this suit. One was a open competition online using the Open IDEO platform. Many of you have probably heard of IDEO. There's an Open IDEO platform that actually crowdsources design thinking solutions. It's actually a hiring tool that IDEO uses as well. They'll see who performs really well on that crowdsourcing tool and often hire people from the pool of folks participating in that crowdsourcing platform. So there was that. There was a traditional kind of agency announcement that went out seeking ideas that could result in contracts or grants. And then there was a series of design-a-thons or make-a-thons, the first of which we hosted in Washington, D.C., brought these suits actually and allowed the designers to cut them apart and hack them back together and recreate new concepts for what suits would look like in person with the experts, with the medicine, with the Doctors Without Borders folks, and with some of the other people that had experienced treatment in this way firsthand. And other make-a-thons that were not government organized started being created themselves all across the country. So they used our model, the videos that we created from that, to inform the solutions that were being generated, and Johns Hopkins actually ran their own. And at this particular make-a-thon, Johns Hopkins, a wedding designer, was one of the members of a team that helped to create a new suit that was so innovative and easy in the way it was constructed that DuPont actually licensed the technology, and the first of those prototype suits were actually deployed in Africa for testing in 2016. And so typically, this was 2 months, 1,500 ideas, $2 million in funding, and 15 ideas were selected using a number of different tools. It wasn't just wasn't one prize competition, wasn't one make-a-thon. It took a lot of support in order to get to a point where we'd innovative on personal protective equipment. The next example is totally different. So this is from the energy sector. So we have had a rise in solar panels and solar electricity that's been used in recent years. Lots of new technologies that are out there, but adoption rates are still not as high as they could be because the soft costs for adopting solar energy are quite high, and some of that is because there's not a complete ability to have transparency in that market to know how much it's going to cost over time and truly how much your energy consumption decreases over time and how it might affect the decisions you'd make as a residential homeowner or a commercial building. And so back in 2014, the Department of Energy decided that they wanted to actually specifically address more of the soft cost, data, and software issues associated with the adoption of solar energy. And they designed a really innovative prize competition called SunShot Catalyst, where they believed fundamentally if they were to take good ideas for business problems in that sector that could be solved and pair them with high potential entrepreneurs, that sustainable businesses would come out the other side. Add some awesomeness and support in the middle, some money, some mentoring. And also what they did here that was very interesting is they didn't assume that the entrepreneurs also had to be software developers. One of the prizes that they offered, one of the stage prizes that they offered in this competition that happened during the business innovation phase, was they offered each of the teams a $25,000 credit. So that wasn't cash, that was $25,000 in credit to a platform called Topcoder. Who's heard of Topcoder? So Topcoder is a software crowdsourcing platform that coders from around the world register on it, and you can actually build software of a number of different types through this crowdsourcing approach where you don't have to have any software developers on your staff. You crowdsource it through Topcoder. DOE provided credits to Topcoder to structure the build for the prototypes of many of their solutions. Those were then demoed at a demo day in San Francisco in front of a series of investors and other judges, and they picked the top 10 winners to receive $30,000 in initial seed funding to start working on their solution. Of those, 3 of the companies met their milestones and got an additional $70,000, including this company, Alana Lucas, who's here on the bottom left. She had actually just lost her job 5 months before the initial Jamathon day that kicked off this event. And within the 5 months to the day of when she showed up to that Jamathon to work on an idea to try to bring together a new company idea, her company had gone from her and her co-founder to 11 people within 5 months. And their solution is called Utility API. What they're focused on is creating a secure and standard way to share utility data with a number of different types of companies that might have a need for utility data, whether that's clean energy technology companies or property management type firms that need authorized access to utility data. They're all over California, the East Coast right now. They partner with on a utility by utility basis to expose that data in a way where then it's usable by other companies. So they're creating utility data as a platform out of this prize competition. The next one, so education, totally different. So understanding education outcomes is notoriously difficult. And in the community college space specifically, and the other thing that I'll mention about this one is that this prize, those previous 2 were heavy-handed government. So the Ebola challenge that was led by, conceived by, there were partners that were non-government in that, but it was government run, federal government run. Second one, Department of Energy, federal government run. This one, totally conceived of and funded by nonprofits and then run by the Aspen Institute. So there was no government role in this prize competition. So it's not like the government's the only one that has to also come up with ideas to support these kinds of things. The fundamental problem here was not really being able to understand what methods at the community college level were working to improve education outcomes. And so this started back in 2011. This is the 4th cycle of the Community College Prize that they are offering up now. And the fundamental point here is identify the best so the rest will raise up with you. This is a recognition prize, right? But it's really a data collection prize in sheep's clothing, which is why I think this one is super cool. So with this particular one, they said, well, we'll work with an evaluation firm and come up with our best guess of the 100 indicators that will tell us what makes the best community college in the nation. And then they ran that analysis and came up with who they thought maybe the best 100 colleges or community colleges in the nation might be. They invited then those community colleges to apply with a much longer data application, right? With many other pieces of data that were not generally available. You could not find that data. It hadn't been reported by these community colleges in a central database. And out of the 150, I apologize, the top 150, out of the 150, they received over 100 actual completed applications. So they didn't get paid to do that. There was a lot of data collection work, but the people wanted the recognition prize, right? They wanted to be named the best community college in the nation and get the $1 million. So there's $1 million associated with then marketing your school that you can use that money to do to help continue to market your university. And so then the data set builds in quality every year. You can apply different methods to understand data being tied to outcomes and change your survey instrument over the course of those 4 years. So now the Aspen Institute and all of these foundations have created the richest data set of understanding education outcomes across the country in a longitudinal way, right? So we have how many years? 6 years of data now through a $1 million prize competition that's happened 4 times. Okay, but it's not always money that incentivizes people to participate, as I said earlier with Gold, Guts, Good, and Glory. Sometimes people just want to participate in the interest of because of the interest of the problem or because of the good of the outcome of the problem if they help to contribute to solve it. So what is this behind me? This is a protoplanetary disk. It's essentially a potential breeding ground for planets that astrophysicists will look at in data that NASA has collected through its WISE observatory, the wide infrared something, and I should know that. Any other NASA person in the room know that? Yeah, WISE, the acronym. And we use algorithms to process through that data to try to understand and identify objects of interest. One of the problems is this is a relatively bright object, especially in the infrared, and there are other infrared objects that are bright in this data set, like asteroids, like other stars, comets, many other things. And algorithms are not good at differentiating between a protoplanetary disk and some of these other items. And so that's where pattern recognition and the human eye comes in. With this particular project, a NASA scientist, Mark Kushner, actually partnered with Zooniverse. Who's heard of Zooniverse? That is a really cool data crowdsourcing platform that they created a kind of a pattern recognition test where people will just go on and spend hours kind of classifying objects, right? And as of, in the first 2 years of this project being on, over 30,000 people are logged onto this site. They're disk detectives. This is called the Disk Detective Project, and they call themselves disk detectives. They're trying to find disks in this data. Over 2 million classifications have happened in the first 2 years. They're trying to get to 3 million classifications, which will identify 1,000 potential objects of interest for future study. So what does this mean? One, it means once they identify an object of potential interest, they can then try to get additional telescope time. There was actually a citizen scientist, you'll see him, Hugo, here to the bottom left, that made a 12-hour drive in Argentina to, they got at the last minute some observation time to go and do some follow-up observations on an object of interest. This citizen scientist associated with the project was the closest guy there, got in his car and drove 12 hours in order to be able to use that time and come up with the additional observations in order to continue to fill the, what we know about that particular object of interest. But you see students in classrooms, you see retirees, you see all sorts of people that are participating in these types of projects, helping to process through data that algorithms are not the most effective way to identify all of the interesting information in. And then there's also been lots of scientific papers that have come out of this. So a couple recently have been published that the citizen scientists are co-authors. So they're co-authors in astrophysicist journals right now because of the work that they have done on the Disk Detective platform. Final example I'm going to talk to you about is the one that's related to my program that I'm working on now. Prior to the job that I'm in now, I was working on open innovation across the federal government, both for NASA and while I was at the White House for a number of different federal agencies like the Department of Energy and USAID. But now back at NASA, we are challenged with the problem of thinking about how we get the most innovative solutions into the technologies and the missions that we are developing every day in order to further our mission. And one of those was the Mars Curiosity rover and the Mars Science Laboratory. This particular science laboratory actually has 6 small businesses that have technologies, component technologies on here that were funded by the SBIR program. So in this particular case, we invested about $10 million over the course of several years to develop some technologies, whether they're gearboxes, vacuum pumps, drills, LiDAR systems. There's a few different types of systems on here. And NASA also put an additional, other programs within NASA put in about an additional $84 million. These technologies, these companies right now are sitting on the surface of Mars. And why is this a different source of ideas than, how does this play along with prizes in citizen science and making and design thinking and all of the other methods that I talked to you about previously? Well, the unique thing here is these are small businesses. Most of the people that we support through the SBIR program have less than 10 employees. So these are small businesses that can be more nimble than the big aerospace vendors. And we need to figure out a way at NASA how it is that we access them for the types of problems that small businesses can actually contribute to. So it goes back to that same question around all of these examples about identifying the types of methods and the sources of funding and the types of incentives for the people that you want to work with in order to solve a vast spectrum of problems. And the solution is not, the type of design, the methods, are not always going to be the same. They're rarely going to be the same. There's a lot of creativity in the way that you combine these tools, both from the seeker side and from the solver side. There's a whole host of things you can participate in. Challenge.gov has had over 600 prize competitions listed on there since it started in 2010. Over $200 million available for winners of prize competitions. CitizenScience.gov, over 300 citizen science projects that are supported by the federal government that are on a catalog up there for you to be able to identify. SBIR, STTR, we've funded over $1 billion worth of investments, $1 billion, in small businesses over the last 5 years. If you compare that to what was funded by angel investors and early stage investors in the same sector, that was about $600 million in the same time period. So SBIR is a significant amount of the funding that is going to small businesses and entrepreneurial companies in this particular sector. So I would encourage, if you work for a company that is thinking about how you might be able to leverage external expertise in different ways, encourage you, this isn't just stuff the government does. In fact, if the government can do it, all of you should be able to do it, because you have less legal restrictions than all of us do in the federal government. But also, if you're more of a solver type, someone that wants to contribute in some way to solving big, hard problems of our time, there's a number of different ways that you can channel your energy through these types of tools, going to these central places to tell you how to participate. So thank you for listening, and have a great rest of your day.